In fantasy games, I've been fighting fire elementals for a long time. SCP Universe has a version of that called SCP-457, the Burning Man. I don't know anything about it, but we're gonna react to it from SCP Exposed, guys. Let's get into it.
The Special Forces unit of the SCP Foundation arrived at the scene.
Like
There
an
had been
MTF?
reports of wildfires all across the country,
Okay.
and Foundation searchers had suspected these random wildfires were of the unnatural origin.
So it's on the eastern
There had also been eyewitness
continents?
accounts of a man of fire who
Right.
had been spotted wandering through
Like
these
a fire
woods, setting
elemental.
fire to everything it touched.
Okay.
The Special Forces unit entered the wildfire with their
kind of a
protective
hot
gear,
issue,
which
huh?
prevented them from being
I'm
burned.
sorry, I won't do that again.
For many hours, they saw nothing but fire. They brought special equipment to douse the fire, and
Right.
yet the fire kept springing up in random places without seemingly any cause.
Okay.
The Special Forces unit
It's the
drove
fireman,
deeper into the woods.
or the fire
then,
elemental.
one member spotted
Or the
what
Burning
appeared to
Man.
be the silhouette of a man.
Uh-huh.
The member called out to the man, inquiring if he needed any help, but the man did not
But he was
reply.
on fire. What
The
do you
man
mean, do you need
slowly
help?
turned to face them. But the member of the Special
He's
Forces
not
unit
screaming.
realized the man was nothing but a silhouette. He had no face,
He's
no eyes, no
completely
mouth.
made of flame.
His silhouette was formed purely by the outlines of the fire.
Ah,
The
see.
member stood still in shock, having not expected to encounter a
What
being
happens
like
if you
this.
try to extinguish
The
him?
silhouette seemed to watch them for several seconds,
Uh-huh.
and then, without warning, it pounced, surging
Wow.
forward and blasting the members with its heat. Welcome back to SCP Exposed. Today
Good to
we
see you,
bring you
bud.
the Euclid and potentially Keter class object,
Okay.
SCP-457.
I've had a few of
also
these
known
recently.
As the Burning Man.
This is like a
This creature is
backdraft when you
currently
hit him,
under
man.
containment at Site 63.
Okay.
SCP-457 is kept in a 5mm by 5mm chamber with no less than
Wonder how
22.9
they
centimeters
caught
of fireproofing material upon all surfaces.
Makes sense.
And a blast-proof observation window with emergency blast
What
shielding
happens when
installed.
you wet him, right?
The opening to the chamber consists of at least 2 temperature-controlled and airtight chambers that
Okay.
may be sealed in case of an emergency breach.
Got you.
SCP-457's chamber is kept at high humidity with a drainage system installed in the floor,
So
as
as to
well
keep
as a
the fire
misting
from-
sprinkler system installed and running constantly, and
so
emergency hoses capable of at least
basically
2.1
keeping him from
MPa
getting
of
too
water
hot.
pressure. The
Yeah.
creature is allowed a small structure upon the wall of its chamber that remains water-free,
Ah.
but only allows for minimal protection and preservation of form.
Minimal.
All personnel entering SCP-457's chamber should be wearing at least Class A temperature-controlled, flame-retardant sealed suits,
Yep.
and enter in groups of 3, with
'Kay.
2 members equipped with high-grade blast shields and emergency fire
For
extinguishers.
that backdraft, though.
Personnel should only enter SCP-457's chamber in order
Fire's
to
scary
supply
when you think about it,
SCP-457 with its
It's-
daily allotment of fuel material,
It's like alive,
or
but
to
this one is
examine
really
and repair
alive.
any damage to the chamber or sprinkler systems. Should
Okay.
SCP-457 engage personnel in a hostile manner,
Yeah?
it is to be controlled via emergency extinguishers and hoses until it retreats
Like a
back
bad
to its
dog
safe chamber.
sprayed him.
In the event
Get
that
back.
SCP-457 breaks containment, emergency sprinkler systems will be triggered, and personnel will be supplied with extinguishers and blast
He
shielding.
can't go nowhere.
The creature's core form is as small as a single flame, comparable to a matchstick.
But then,
In this state, SCP-457
Right.
does not make any sign of communication or sentience,
Yeah.
apart from occasionally moving to burn a human's hand or
Oh.
to jump to a source of fuel in order to grow larger. When SCP-457
Yeah.
finds more fuel,
That
it
might
grows
be why
larger,
it's Keter,
and with this
or
growth
considered
comes an increased growth
be
in
Keter.
intelligence and sentience.
yeah, it gets
Additionally,
more
it will grow
powerful
to
and
produce an
smarter.
outline of a man's silhouette which is formed by its own flame.
Got you.
Once SCP-457 reaches an unknown threshold of size and fuel source, SCP-457 splits into 2 beings, and so on and so forth.
See, it multiplies
However,
like fire.
multiple beings of SCP-457 are aggressive towards each other
Oh.
and will either attempt to consume or extinguish their doubles, especially if there is only a limited amount of fuel at hand.
I see.
SCP-457's behavior is largely predictable,
Very
as its
interesting.
goals are simply to acquire larger sources of fuel
Yeah.
and to spread. The danger of
That's fire.
SCP-457 comes
In
from its
general.
ability to increase intelligence with size
That
and
is
apparent ability to learn and mimic
Imagine if the
behaviors.
bigger the fire's got,
This has
the
led to
smarter.
its purposely damaging
more
and
aggressive
sabotaging
it will
sprinkler
become.
systems, and
Yeah.
in rare circumstances, setting up relatively complex traps. It has also attempted to trick or reason with personnel to be released or have access to more fuel.
Yeah,
Although these attempts
mean,
have
it's
all
smart.
been a failure on the creature's part.
sure.
An example of one of these complex traps is the incident that took place in March of 2019.
Okay, tell us about that.
SCP-457 managed to convince one of the personnel on site to enter its chamber after claiming it would reveal the secrets of the universe if the personnel entered its chamber. It is noted that this individual had just been moved to SCP-457 site and was also a newly appointed Level 2 member.
Right.
Thus, he was a vulnerable candidate for the creature's manipulation. Once the individual entered the chamber, SCP-457 proceeded to lunge out and attempt to burn him.
Of course.
However, luckily for the individual, the creature had not been fed yet and was still very weak. Thus, he managed to escape with his life. Although it could have turned out much differently if SCP-457 had already been fed.
Heck yeah.
SCP-457 is able to communicate with Foundation personnel, either through letterings made by flames or scorch marks on the walls, or through verbal speech, although this is a rarity. When the creature was first captured and contained at Site-63, it proceeded to write out insults against humans on the walls of its chamber, such as,
"Humans will burn. Fire succeeds all."
In the years of its containment at the Foundation, SCP-457 has only held one single conversation with Foundation personnel, which was a monumental discovery, as previously it only spoke in short gasps and small sentences. The creature is able to produce verbal speech through high-pressure superheated air and the crackling and pops of flames.
Interesting.
The following is an interview conducted between Dr.
I was hoping that we'd get some voice.
SCP-457.
Give us a sample.
Currently. Yes. Good. Would you mind answering some questions?
That's the Vulcan's voice again, yeah. Vulcan's been working with the for quite a bit. I like it.
Dislike. No fuel.
It's very fiery.
Air.
That's awesome.
We've provided you with adequate air and fuel to survive. Cannot burn.
No, you can't burn it all down, sucker.
How do you feel? Hungry. Do you feel
scary
besides hunger? How do you feel about humans? They burn.
He just wants to consume everything.
How do you feel about fuel?
Fuel! It burns good.
Please move away from the window, or we will be forced to reduce your size considerably.
They're gonna spray you, boy. Back on up, Fido.
Move away from the window.
He's getting mad.
Or we will be forced to turn the sprinklers back on. Do you understand that? Stay away from the window and you will not be doused.
Douse him.
Do you understand?
Douse him.
I want fuel. I want air. I want burn.
What a wicked voice, huh?
Burn. There isn't a way out.
Yeah.
If you would please.
He's mad.
What's it doing? Looking for a way out?
Yeah. Oh.
At this point in the interview, SCP-457 managed to severely damage much of the sprinkler system and destroy a portion of the fuel injector that had been sustaining its intelligent form, giving it free access to several gallons of gasoline.
Wow.
The interview transcript was recorded via security footage from before the blast. How SCP-457 managed to exploit the weakness of its chamber is unknown, and it has since been moved to a higher security chamber.
Maybe it got emotional.
SCP-457's
like how adrenaline affects us
unknown.
when we get very
Some
mad
researchers
or very
theorize
scared.
the creature is a former human being who was involved in some sort of accident or mishap that resulted in a change in its genetic code
that died
and
in a
sort
fire
of merging with the closest element to it,
mutated.
presumably fire. Others theorize it is an evolved form of fire, perhaps triggered by a nuclear reaction of some sort. A few believe SCP-457 is an alien life form, whilst the more religious members believe it is a being from hell. Whatever the case, the Foundation has not made a sound conclusion as to exactly where SCP-457 came from. It appears to be destructive and violent, thus its containment is crucial in order to protect the outside world. As of now, Foundation personnel are working on a method to perhaps harness SCP-457's power source.
Of course they want to weaponize
experiments
it.
are still under work.
Yeah, be careful with that trash. You playing with fire, you're gonna get burned. I'm sorry I had to say it. Guys, SCP Exposed. This was a really, really cool SCP. Make sure to go check them out, as well as a couple other SCP Exposed reactions I did. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. We'll see you next time.